Late summer, high on the roof of northern England, the hill is called Cross Fell, and this storm is real weather for this place. The Pennines take some of the heaviest rain in the country. Watch 2 raindrops land, a hand's width apart, on the broad back of the summit. They fell from the same cloud in the same second. They will never meet again. This one slides east into a little syke that feeds the River Tees and the North Sea. Its neighbor tips west, down the Great Scarp into the Vale of Eden, and its water will pass Carlisle on the way to the Irish Sea. A hand's width of mossy ground has divided them for good. That dividing line, the crest you can walk along while 2 seas pull at your bootlaces, is called a watershed. Every scrap of land on Earth belongs to one side of some watershed or another, and the land inside one boundary, drained by one river and all its branches, is called a drainage basin. The basin is the machine this film is about, because what a river does with its rain is not just carry it away. A river uses it to take the land itself apart. Here's the whole machine at work. The basin of the River Eden, drawn from real elevation data. Every stream in its real place. Watch the storm's water come down, order by order. The smallest threads, the ones with no tributaries at all, are first-order streams. Where 2 of them meet, a second-order stream begins. Where 2 of those meet, a third, and so on, down to the trunk. A tree standing in the rain, made of falling water. Now look along the trunk from the side, from the summit to the sea. This curve, high and steep at the source, long and flat at the mouth, is the river's long profile, and it is the spine of everything that follows. A river spends energy. How much depends on its gradient, its volume, and the shape of its channel. Up here, steep and hungry, it cuts. Down there, wide and loaded, it lays its cargo down, and that cargo is the point. Grain by grain, a river carries its own valley to the sea. Erode, transport, deposit, 3 verbs, 1 budget. Spend them along one long profile, and you get every landform in this film. This is how every river is a project to move a mountain into the sea. The Upper Reach. This is the gorge of the Kali Gandaki in Nepal, rebuilt here from real terrain measurements, the same valley the chapter photographs at the village of Tatakani. In the mountains, a river's young, whatever its age, because here it does one thing with almost all its energy. It cuts downward into its own bed. Vertical erosion. The cross-section of a valley like this is a V. Narrow floor, steep sides. And the V is a signature you can read. The river only cuts the notch at the very bottom. Everything above the waterline is the work of weather. Frost, levering rock apart, rain washing it, gravity walking the broken slopes down into the channel where the river hauls them away. Cutting below, collapse above, that partnership is what keeps the V shape as the valley deepens. Where the rock is hard, or the climate too dry to rot the walls, the sides stand nearly sheer. Where rock is soft, the V opens wide. The river is fast here, white and loud, but do not mistake the noise for the work. The noise is water. The work is done with stone. How does water cut rock at all? 4 tools and it never puts them down. First, sheer force. Hydraulic action, the weight of moving water slamming into cracks, compressing the air inside them, prying blocks loose. Second, abrasion. The river uses the load it carries as a file, dragging sand and cobbles across its bed and grinding it down. Watch a pothole form. Pebbles trapped in a hollow, spun by the current, drilling a smooth round shaft into solid rock. A drill, bit made of its own victims. Third, attrition. The load wears itself out, boulders knocking against boulders, chipping corners, rounding edges, shrinking downstream from blocks to cobbles to gravel to sand. Fourth solution, some rock, limestone especially, simply dissolves and rides away invisibly in the water itself. And the cargo travels in 3 ways. The heaviest grains bounce and hop along the bed. Saltation. Finer grains ride inside the flow, held up by turbulence. Suspension. The dissolved fraction travels in solution. Every grain in motion is the mountain leaving. The ledger in the corner of the frame has started counting, and it will not stop until the sea. A young river does not run straight. It never has the chance. This is the valley of the Carron water in the Lowther hills of Scotland, the same hills the chapter photographs. Real terrain again. Every contour measured. The river takes the easiest line, swinging around every knuckle of harder rock, and so the valley wins. The ridges between the bends lock into one another like fingers folded, and from the valley floor you can never see far. Each spur hides the next. These are interlocking spurs, and on a contour map they draw themselves. Nested V's of contour lines pointing upstream, overlapping left and right. But look closely at what the bends are already doing. On the outside of each bend, the water runs faster and cuts at the slope's toe. On the inside, it slackens and drops gravel. Already, this young valley carries the seed of everything the river will become in its lowland age, the bend that eats one bank and feeds the other. Hold that thought. First, the river has some steps to take, and one of them roars. Where a band of hard rock lies across a river's course, the river finds the flaw in the arrangement. Downstream of the hard band, the softer rock wears away quickly. The bed steepens, and the river begins to fall. This is Niagara. The shape of the falls and the gorge below them drawn from real survey terrain. The recipe is written in the cliff. On top, a thick cap of hard dolomite. Beneath it, weak shale. The water pours over the hard lip and lands with the weight of a lake behind it in a churning pit at the base. A plunge pool drilled deep by falling water and the stones it spins. And there, in the shadow behind the curtain, the real work happens. Spray and turbulence chew at the soft shale, hollowing a cave into the cliff's foot. The hard cap above becomes a shelf with nothing under it. It holds. It holds. And then it does not. The lip cracks and drops its overhang into the pool, and the falls have a new face. One block's width upstream of the old one. Undercut. Overhang. Collapse. A waterfall is not a place, it is a process. Walking. And it has been walking for a very long time. 12,500 years ago, as the ice sheets left, Niagara's water first poured over the great escarpment near what is now Queenston. The falls have been retreating ever since. Undercut, collapse, step back, and behind them they have left a corridor cut through solid rock. The Niagara Gorge, 11 kilometers of it, the fall's own footprints. The clock on screen is honest. 10,000 years pass in seconds here, and the crest line you see stepping upstream follows the surveyed record. Since the 1840s, engineers have measured the crest again and again, and in the photographed century, the horseshoe was losing roughly a meter or two every year. Today, with much of the river diverted through power stations, the retreat has slowed to centimeters. But the direction has never changed. Every waterfall on Earth is temporary. Each one is eating the step it lives on, wearing its own height down, migrating toward the source until the step is spent and the fall decays into a slope of broken water, rapids, and finally into a smooth reach of river. The gorge stays behind as the receipt. Niagara is one member of a family. Any arrangement that puts hard rock above soft in a river's path will build a step. A hard band tilted gently upstream makes a stable fall that retreats cleanly. A vertical wall of hard rock makes a brink that wears to a chute. A hard band tilted downstream sheds its water in a rough, stumbling slope. Not a fall at all, but a rapid. Born a rapid. Sometimes the step is not made by erosion, but by violence. A fault throws the land itself, and the river simply falls off the broken edge. And sometimes the maker is ice. A glacier gouges the main valley deep and straight, and when the ice goes, every side stream is left hanging, its floor amputated high on the trunk valley's wall, its water arriving by air. Junctions in mountain country are noisy places, but every one of these steps obeys Niagara's law. Undercut, collapse, retreat. Waterfall becomes rapid, rapid becomes riffle, riffle becomes river. The long profile is patient. It is sanding its own staircase smooth, from the sea upward, one irregularity at a time. Give the process room and time, and this is what it builds. The Grand Canyon of the Colorado. Real terrain. No exaggeration. None is needed. Just over 1,900 meters deep. Around 450 kilometers long. 6 to 28 kilometers rim to rim. The recipe here has 3 lines. Take a high plateau of layered rock. Hard bands over soft. Keep lifting it. Slowly. For millions of years. So the river inside never stops cutting to keep pace. Measured today at roughly 100 to 160 meters of down cutting every million years, with the Colorado's modern course threading the canyon for the last 5 or 6 million. And keep the climate dry, so the walls rot slowly and stand nearly as steep as the river cuts them. A gorge is a V-valley where the third partner, weathering, barely shows up for work. Stand on the rim and the far wall's a book. Every band of color is a bed of rock, and the river that exposed the whole library is a brown thread, almost too small to see, still reading downward. The mountain reach has shown what cutting can do. Now the land flattens, and the river changes its verb. Leave the mountains and the rules change. The gradient slackens, so the energy per meter falls. But the volume has grown, tributary by tributary, so the total energy is greater than ever. The river stops spending it on the bed and starts spending it on the banks. Lateral erosion, cutting sideways, takes over from vertical. Watch what that does to the young valley we left behind. The bends swing wider. Each one cuts at the toe of the spur on its outside bank, trimming it, blunting it, until the interlocked fingers are cut back to a line of flattened stubs, bluffs, standing like a fence along the valley's edge. The valley floor between them opens out, and the river, no longer pinned, begins to wander. Weathering lowers the ridges. Tributaries open side valleys, and on the inside of every swing, deposition quietly begins. Gravel first, then sand, spread across the widening floor. The V is becoming a trough with a ribbon of flat land at the bottom. The middle-aged river has traded depth for width, and its valley now has room for the river to misbehave in, and misbehave at will. Why does a river bend at all, even on a floor with no hard rock to dodge? Look into the channel itself. No natural river bed is even. The water piles gravel into shallow bars and scours deep, slow reaches between them. Riffle, pool, riffle, pool. Spaced with an odd regularity, about 5 to 7 channel widths apart. Over the shallow rifles, the water quickens and burns energy. In the pools, it rests and stores it. That alternation nudges the strongest thread of current from side to side, and the moment the thread leans on one bank, the machine starts. Because flow through a bend corkscrews. The surface water races to the outside, the bed water crawls back along the bottom toward the inside. One continuous spiral, like thread on a screw. On the outside, the fast, deep water undercuts the bank and holds a small cliff of bare earth. The river cliff. On the inside, the slow bed crawl drops its sand and gravel onto a gentle ramp, the slip-off slope. Erosion on one bank, deposition on the other, joined by one corkscrew of water. The bend does not just persist, it grows. And growing bends migrate? This is the Yamuna on the plain south of Delhi. Its channel drawn from real map data. And the loops you see are called meanders. What happens next runs by rule, not by artist's hand. A computed model of bank erosion, running on the real geometry. Each bend cuts hardest just downstream of its own apex, so each loop both swells outward and creeps down valley, the whole train of them crawling like a slow wave through the floodplain. Measured against fixed ground, rivers like this move their banks by meters, sometimes tens of meters, in a single year. Farmland keeps the diary. Field boundaries that once followed the bank are left inland. Old scars of abandoned channel curve through the crops. Villages that were founded on the waterfront learn patience. There's a limit, though. Watch the necks. the strips of land between one loop's approach and its own return. The river is cutting at both sides of each neck at once. Every year the gap closes a little. The river is drawing a knife toward its own throat, and one flood will close the scissors. First, understand the floor all this is happening on, because the river built it. Season by season, the wandering channel and its floods have spread sheet after sheet of sediment across the valley. Alluvium, the river's own gravel, sand, and mud laid over the bedrock the old young river once cut. This flat-built land is the floodplain. Its edges are the bluff line, the fence of trimmed spurs where the valley walls begin. Between the bluffs, everything underfoot has passed through the river at least once. The floodplain is an archive with the pages loose. Dig, and you find bar gravels where a bend once swung, clay plugs where old channels choked, dark curving seams where water stood. On the surface, the river writes in plain sight. Meander scars, crescent ponds, low ridges of coarser ground marking banks it abandoned centuries ago. Nothing here is fixed. The channel you would draw on today's map is one frame of a film that has been running since the ice left. And twice a year or so, the author floods and edits the whole page at once. Rain again, but now the whole basin drains to a river that has nowhere to hurry to. The channel fills, the water climbs its banks, and then in one quiet, decisive moment, it is over them, and the floodplain is doing the job it is named for. Watch the physics of the spill. The moment water leaves the channel, it shallows and slow water cannot carry what fast water could. So the heaviest load, the sand, drops at once, right along the channel's rim. Flood after flood, those rims grow into raised banks of the river's own making, levees. Meanwhile, the finer silt rides further and settles as a thin dressing over the whole plain. The gift that makes floodplains farmland. But there is a trap in this generosity. In the quiet seasons, the river drops sediment on its own bed too, raising the floor between the levees. Bed up, banks up, year after year, until the water between the levees runs higher than the fields outside them. The Huanghe in China, the Mississippi. Great rivers perched above their own plains, held in by earth walls. When such a river breaks its levee, it does not overflow. It falls out onto country below it, and the flood arrives with a height advantage. New Zealand. The Wairau River, on its plain near Blenheim, the same reach the chapter photographs from the air, rebuilt from real map geometry, with its true loops and its crescent lakes already lying in the fields beside it. The model runs the river forward again by rule. One neck here has been narrowing for decades, two bends cutting toward each other with only a strip of pasture between. Now the flood comes. Deep, fast water shortcuts straight across the neck. And the river has cut itself a new channel through the gap. 700 meters of loop replaced by 70 of shortcut. The abandoned loop does not empty at once. It stands as a side channel, slack and confused, until the sealing begins. The main flow, slowing at each junction where the old loop leaves and rejoins, drops sand across both doorways. Two plugs of sediment grow, and the loop is walled off into a lake shaped like a horn of the old bend, an oxbow lake. Its water stills. Reeds close in from the rims. Silt settles. Each flood adds a layer, and over the years the oxbow shallows into marsh. The marsh into a green scar in the pasture. The river has already forgotten it. It is busy narrowing the next neck. Not every lowland river settles into a single confident channel. Load a river beyond what its discharge can carry. Feed it glacier flour and monsoon-stripped mountains, then let the flood season pass, and watch what happens when the water drops. This is the Brahmaputra in Assam, its channels drawn from real map data. Not one river, but a braid, kilometers wide, water woven around a shifting archipelago of sand. The mechanism is the flood's hangover. High water carries an immense load. Falling water must abandon it. The abandoned sand piles into mid-channel bars. Each bar splits the flow into two weaker threads. Each thread drops more sand and splits again. In the dry season, the braid glitters and wanders. Next flood, the islands drown, dissolve, and reform somewhere else. On such a plain, even the tributaries struggle. Blocked by the main river's own levees, a would-be tributary may run parallel to its master for kilometers, deferred before it finds a doorway in. And where the wandering trunk cuts downward as it swings, a final trick of the lowlands, it leaves fragments of its old floodplain stranded as flat steps on the valley sides. Terraces, unpaired left and right, the abandoned floors of a river that kept moving. Remember them. They come back, sharpened, near the end of this film. Climb high enough and every basin becomes a signature. From the air, the Eden streams draw a tree, a trunk, boughs, twigs, joining at comfortable acute angles, filling the land evenly. This is dendritic drainage, from the Greek for tree. And it is what water does when the rock beneath is roughly the same in every direction, offering no argument. The main stream simply follows the slope it was given. It is called the consequent river because it is the consequence of the land's original tilt. Uniform rock, patient water, a tree. But rock is rarely uniform, and where it argues, the water listens. Bend the strata, tilt them, stripe the country with hard and soft, and the tree is combed into something else entirely. The pattern of a river system, seen from above, is a fingerprint, not of the water, of the rock underneath. Here are three of the classics on three real landscapes. Southeast England, the Weald between London and the Channel. The rock here is striped, chalk, green sand, clay, sandstone. Layers arched up long ago and beveled flat since, so the stripes crop out in bands. Hard bands stand up as ridges, the North Downs, the South Downs, walking across the country as escarpments. Soft bands are eaten into broad vales between. Now watch the water organize. The main rivers, the Medway, the Stour, the Ouse, run down the regional slope at right angles across the stripes, sawing straight through the chalk ridges and narrow river gaps. Their tributaries cannot follow. They turn along the soft bands instead, mining headward along the clay, parallel to the ridges, meeting their masters at right angles. The result on the map is a trellis, a grid of junctions near 90 degrees, main streams one way, subsequents the other. Read such a map and you can draw the geology without ever lifting a hammer. Every right angle is a soft bed found, every river gap a hard one defeated. The English Lake District plays a different trick. Its rivers and long lakes radiate from the central fells like spokes from a hub. Radial drainage, the pattern water makes on a dome, every stream running straight down its own side. Nothing strange there. Volcanoes wear the same haircut. The strangeness is underneath. The rocks of the Lake District are not a dome. They are folded slates, and volcanics stripe northeast to southwest, and the streams ignore the stripes completely, slicing across them as if they could not see them. They could not. The spokes were laid out on a smooth dome of much younger rock that once buried this whole country. A lid that has since been entirely stripped away. The rivers cutting down through the vanishing lid were lowered onto the old folded basement like a stencil onto a table, keeping the pattern of a surface that no longer exists. This is superimposed drainage, a river system inherited from a deleted landscape. The pattern outlived its cause. On the map, the ghost of the dome is still reigning. One pattern is stranger still, the river that ignores a mountain range. The Yarlung Tsangpo rises behind the Himalaya and runs quietly east for 1,000 kilometers, then turns and saws directly through the highest mountain belt on Earth to come out the other side as the Brahmaputra. It can do this for one reason. The river is older than the mountains. It was already flowing when the range began to rise, and it has cut downward as fast as the rock came up, holding its line like a bandsaw against a log being fed into it. Drainage that predates the uplift it crosses is called antecedent, and this is its masterpiece. Where the river passes the peak of Namcha Barwa, It runs at the floor of the deepest canyon on land, on average some 5,000 meters from rim to river. 3 Grand Canyons deep, cut into country that is still rising today. The detailed history is still argued over. Captures and buried older canyons complicate the tale, but the standing fact is on screen, from real terrain. A 7,000-meter peak on one side, another on the other, and a river running calmly between their roots, through the range, as if the mountains had made way. They did not. They lost. A river's work has a floor, base level, the level of the sea, below which no river can cut. But the floor can move, lift the land, or drop the sea, and every gradient steepens. The river wakes with energy it did not have yesterday and turns it downward again. This is rejuvenation. An old river handed a young river's job. It shows on the long profile as a kink, a nick point, the sharp step where the new, lower curve is eating its way up into the old one, announced on the ground by a fresh waterfall or a run of rapids gnawing upstream, Niagara's Law, all over again. And where the fall passes, the river entrenches. On the plain, it cuts down through its own floodplain, leaving the old flat surface stranded in matching steps on both sides of the valley. Paired terraces, one former floor, cut in 2. And if the sleepy river was meandering when the order came, it keeps its loops and carves them vertically into rock. These are the goosenecks of the San Juan in Utah from real terrain. Floodplain curves, sunk 300 meters into stone, a river's lazy signature notarized in bedrock. On the contour map, the loops nest like growth rings. In the field, you can stand on a neck of rock and watch the same river flow past you twice. Rivers also fight each other, not with water, with geometry. Every stream extends its valley headward, biting back into the ridge above its source. Give one river an advantage, softer rock, a wetter slope, a lower outlet, and it cuts back faster than its neighbor. The Northumberland map remembers such a war. The Wansbeck and the Blythe once rose far to the west. Drawn from today's real river courses, their upper valleys still point back toward headwaters they no longer own. The North Tyne, cutting on softer ground toward a lower junction, drove its head back until it broke into the Wansbeck's upper valley from the side, and took it. The captured headwater turned 90 degrees on the spot and now flows down the Tyne instead. On the map, the theft is legible in 3 marks. The elbow of capture, that sudden right angle turn, where the stolen water changes allegiance. The wind gap, the dry notch just beyond the elbow, a valley with no river in it, still holding the shape of the water that made it. And the misfit, the surviving Wansbeck, a small stream apologizing down a valley, obviously carved by something larger. Piracy, the geographers call it, without embarrassment. The strong river grows stronger. The weak one keeps the paperwork. Every verb the river owns has been pointing here. The sea. Where the current meets standing water, its velocity dies, and with it, the last of the carrying power. The load lets go in strict order of weight. Sand first at the mouth's threshold, silt further out, the finest clay drifting far offshore before it settles. Layer on layer, the dumped load builds a submerged platform. And when the platform breaks the surface, the river has done something extraordinary. It has made land. A delta. The price is chaos at the doorstep. A river crossing its own fresh deposits is a river with no firm banks. It clogs its channel, splits, splits again, and reaches the sea through a fan of shifting mouths. Distributaries, the tributary pattern, run in reverse. Between them, levees pen, shallow lagoons. The lagoons trap the next flood's silt and fill. Plants root, bind, and build. And the swamp hardens outward into fields. Stage by stage, the fan grows seaward, as long as one condition holds. The river must deliver mud faster than the waves and tides can steal it. That contest, river against sea, is decided differently on different coasts. 3 verdicts, 3 shapes. Egypt. The Nile meets a sea with almost no tide and winds on points. Its delta spreads in the classic broad fan, the inverted cone that made a Greek letter into a landform. The arcuate delta, its rim gently trimmed into smooth bars and lagoons by Mediterranean waves, its green fan visible from orbit against the desert, drawn here from real coastline and channel data, as all three of these are. Louisiana. The Mississippi delivers so much sediment into so weak a sea that it does not bother with a fan. Each distributary builds its own levees straight out into the Gulf, like fingers feeling for deeper water. The Bird's Foot Delta. It is a fast game and a restless one. The measured record shows the river has switched its favored course roughly every 1,000 years, stacking overlapping lobes, each abandoned finger left to sink as the next one grows. And France. The Seine meets the Channel's mighty tides, which sweep the mouth clean twice a day. No fan survives. The river's deposits are combed into banks inside a drowned funnel. An estuarine delta, forever being built and forever being tidied. Same river physics, 3 coastlines, 3 signatures. The sea, it turns out, is co-author of every delta's shape. And when the contest runs for long enough, this is the scale of the prize. The delta of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, 2 of the great sediment rivers of Earth arriving together, has built roughly 100,000 square kilometers of Bengal, the largest delta on the planet, fringed by the Sundarbans, the vast tiger-haunted mangrove forest of its seaward edge. The rivers that built it deliver on the order of 1 billion tons of Himalayan sediment every year. Say that slowly. 1 billion tons, the high mountains, ferried to the Bay of Bengal every year by water. This is the ledger from our first act, paid out in full. And deltas are only the visible edge of the habit. Given time, delta merges into floodplain and floodplain into delta until whole provinces are river-made. The North China Plain is the layered gift of the Huanghe. The plains of Iraq were laid down by the Tigris and Euphrates. Civilizations learned to farm and to write on ground that mountains had donated. In theory, the story ends here. The profile ground smooth, the land worn low, the river old. In practice, the earth rarely lets it finish. The land lifts, base level falls, and somewhere a new nick point starts walking. The wheel turns again. Which leaves the species that moved in. We settled the terraces, dry-footed, flat, close to water. We farmed the floodplains and the delta silt. We drank the river, watered crops with it, turned it through power stations, and used it as the drain for everything we made. The Thames repaid London honestly. By 1957, the river through the capital was declared biologically dead, oxygen too low, from Kew to Gravesend, for a single recorded fish. It took decades of sewage works and law to reverse what a century of convenience had done. Today, well over 100 fish species live in the estuary again, with seals hauling out within sight of the towers. A river forgets nothing, but it forgives quickly when the load changes. So, rain on a hill. That is all this ever was. 2 drops, a hand's width apart, and every landform in this film. The V and the falls, the loops, and the lakes. The braid, the terraces, the stolen valleys, the new countries of mud, is just what falling water does to a planet with relief, given the one ingredient the film has compressed: time. The next storm is already climbing the scarp of Crossfell. Somewhere on the summit moss, 2 more drops are about to land. The mountain is not finished moving.